back to the channel, or welcome if you're new here. Today I'm doing something I've never done before. Plenty of other people on BookTube have done this, and to be honest, it's one of my favorite videos to watch. Like, absolute catnip. You'll have seen from the title that I'm going to be giving you my predictions, wish list, I don't know what to call it, for the Women's Prize for Fiction. I love watching these videos, and to be totally transparent, I've watched a lot of them. So I have a stack of 16 books, but they have been inspired by other people's predictions, as well as some research that I've done on my own or books that I already had on my radar. I will say that if I have included something that is not eligible, I did my best. So I looked at the publication dates, I looked at the publishers to make sure they have a UK publisher and they fall within the eligibility dates, as well as the page count, because it's really a word count. But yeah, so I have done my best as far as the actual eligibility requirements, and for the most part I just am excited about a lot of these books, and I have no illusions that I'm going to get very many right. I'd be happy if I get one right, but yeah, so let's jump into it and I'll tell you the books that I am predicting or hoping to see on the Women's Prize for Fiction long list when it is announced on March 4th. So the first three books are all by authors who have previously been on a Women's Prize long list. My understanding is that when an author has been on the long list before, then their book is, I think, automatically, or they have the option to, something like that. Basically, these are more likely to have been submitted by the publisher, so I feel really good about these. The first one, surprising no one if you have watched my channel in the last year, Shy Creatures by Claire Chambers. So Claire Chambers was longlisted for Small Pleasures, which I read and enjoyed, much like everybody else. The ending angered me deeply. But Shy Creatures was one of my favorite books of 2024. So I would personally love to see it on the long list and see more people read it. It is a book about a woman who is an art therapist at a mental health institute, and she's having an affair with a doctor there who is married. And so half of the book is about that and about her like grappling with that. And then there is a man who is found in this dilapidated old mansion where he's been living with his aunts, secluded for years, and his aunt falls ill and he's discovered, and it's about his story. So like their interactions, and we get to see his story like going backwards through time, which I love, until we find out like what led to him never leaving his aunt's house again. And it was just a brilliant book, so would love to see that there. The next one is There Are Rivers in the Sky by Elif Shafak. She was longlisted for the book The Island of Missing Trees, and I've read both of these books. I would say that I've enjoyed this one more. This is basically a really ambitious novel that spans centuries. So there are three perspectives. One set in like the 1800s in London around the River Thames, and it's a man or a boy who's like in poverty, and it's like following his life as he gets older and his obsession with Mesopotamia and Assyrian culture. And then you have somebody who there's a 2018 and 2014 perspective, and one of those is in London and the other one is in modern day Turkey near the Tigris. And water is a big theme of this, like the way water like recirculates, and there's like a little bit of a thing where a drop of water has like thoughts and feelings, which I don't love, but it's really small part of the story. The story is really about like colonialism and who gets to write history and poverty and just like connections. And it's really a fantastic story, and I think that it has a really high likelihood of being on the list. But I feel like this is the one that I wouldn't be surprised like that people would say was snubbed. Like that's how I feel about this one, is like I think it has a high likelihood to be there, but I also think there's a possibility it might not be there and people will be shocked. One that ultimately I don't think will be there, but I kind of hope is there, is Tell Me Everything by Elizabeth Strout. So Elizabeth Strout was longlisted, I think, last year for a William, maybe. And Tell Me Everything is set in that same town that a William is. It's actually the only one of those books that I've read, so they can definitely be read standalone. And this is a book about stories, about people's unrecorded lives, and about just like the things that we don't know that other people are going through. The plot basically talks about how it's about Bob Burgess, who's like the town lawyer, and how he takes on this murder investigation. But like the story isn't really about the murder investigation, so I wouldn't want somebody to go in this thinking it's like a mystery or thriller. It's totally not. It is a slow-paced book about what motivates people and the things that they may have been through in their life that we don't know just by like interactions with them. So I think that it could be a really timely book. So that's why I put it on here, is I think there is a slim chance it could be on there, but I will not be surprised to not see this one on there. So those are actually 3 books that I've read. Now we're getting into all of the books that I have not read. So the first one is Adeline by Genevieve Wheeler, and I'm looking down because I have note cards because I don't know these books as well. So this one has themes of mental health and relationships. It's about a 20-something woman who moves to London, meets a British man who's like not the greatest to her, but she thinks she's in love. He suffers like a tragedy or a tragic loss or something like that, and so then she's taking on the role of comforter and trying to like help him and be like his rock. And then her mental health starts to decline. So I think this one's an interesting book, just because I know that mental health is often something the Women's Prize features. And I think that like the relationship dynamics and all of that could have this one finding a place on the list. Talking about things that we typically see on the Women's Prize, they do have a tendency to include like one book that is like speculative or genre fiction. And for me, I think this year it could be Hum by Helen Phillips. This sounds like such a fascinating book. It's about a woman whose job is replaced with AI. And so kind of to make ends meet and make money for her family, she participates in this like experiment where they change her face in a way that it can't be recognized by surveillance. And then she takes her family to like a nature preserve or something like that and has them leave all of their devices at home. And then it's like things unravel and she has to end up depending on an artificial intelligence for their survival, is what it sort of sounds like. Not totally sure. I think this one has like a lot to say about climate, about motherhood, about selfhood, about AI. So I definitely think that this is a really high contender for that like genre fiction spot we often see. And then another thing that we see sometimes on, I mean, not sometimes, every time, is a more like commercial fiction. And for me, I think The Husbands has a really good chance of being that book this year, because this just seems really quirky, but also like something that the Women's Prize would put on the list. So it's a debut novel about a woman who, she comes home and she has a husband, but she wasn't aware she had a husband. And she's really confused by this. All of her friends know who this person is. She has pictures and like history. And so she's trying to figure out like, how did I get this husband and I don't remember it? And then he goes to the attic to change a light bulb and a completely different husband comes down. And so like every time the husband goes to the attic, a different person comes down and it like changes her life around her. And so yeah, it kind of just seems like something fun, and also like it has a lot of things that she's kind of grappling with at the same time. But that one I think has a high contender for that commercial fiction spot. So then I want to talk about historical fiction for a minute. So we often see historical fiction on the Women's Prize, and this first one is the one that I think honestly I would be the most surprised not to see on the list. Which is funny because I hadn't heard about it a week ago, but like this sounds like the most Women's Prize book out of all of the books that I have on my list, and that is The Silence in Between by Josie Ferguson. So this book is about a mother who gives birth to her baby in the hospital. The baby needs to be in the hospital a little longer. She is told to go home and rest, and so she does. And then when she wakes up the next morning, the borders between East and West Germany, or Berlin, have been closed. And she is on one side of the wall and her baby is on the other. And so it's about like survival and motherhood and just like grappling with that. And this sounds so incredible. And I am definitely going to pick this up and read it no matter what. But for some reason, like that's the one that I get the vibe is like it has to be there. Then one that I've seen a lot of people put on their list and I agree with is Confessions by Catherine Airy. This is a book that spans a couple of different time periods. So it's a multi like generational book. And it spans 2001, 1974 and 2018. And in 2001, our kind of main character is a girl who is living in New York City, and it's post 9/11, and her father is missing, and she gets this letter from this aunt that she didn't know existed saying, hey, come to Ireland. And so she does, and then we get, it sounds like the perspective of maybe the aunt and her sister or something like that, from the 70s, and then we get the like modern day portrait, which is like the 2018, that seems to have both the aunt and the girl in it. So I don't know a ton about this one, even though I've kind of listened to a couple people talk about it, but this one sounds like a really interesting one, like family dynamics, personal identity, all of that, like the historical context of all of this. So I think that one has a high likelihood. Another one that I think everyone's talking about is The Safekeep by Yael van der Wooden, I think is how it's pronounced. So this is a debut novel. It's set in 1961 in the Netherlands, and this woman is living in her family home, and she's like super introverted, likes to be like sings a certain way, and then her brother brings his new girlfriend to stay for the summer, and things unfold. I want to know as little about this as possible, just because I've heard some things, but it sounds like it's a really like tense and beautifully written novel, and I'm excited for it, and I think it could be there. And then to round out historical fiction, I picked Costanza. This is by Rachel Blackmore, and this is set in 1636, and Costanza is just like an ordinary woman. She is married, she's young, and then it sounds like she starts an affair with the artist Bernini, who then is like obsessed with her. She is his like muse, and he wants to possess her essentially. So he makes this sculpture of her that he unveils to the public, and like their affair is then outed, and she is basically ruined and in scandal. And one of the quotes that I just really loved and was like, is basically saying that Bernini would rather destroy her than let her go, but that she's not an ordinary woman. She will rise from the ashes. And I think one of the things I meant to say at the beginning of this video, I think given our current climate, because the Women's Prize does tend to be sometimes a little on the nose about current events. But I think given our current climate, we're going to see a lot of books with strong female heroines. And so that's one of the things I think this book has going for it, is that it's going to be like a story about a woman that is like super strong and resilient. So yeah. So then following on in that kind of resiliency of women thing, Nesting by Rosine O'Donnell seems like a good contender. This is about a woman who just decides on the spur of the moment to take her laundry off the clothesline, grab her kids, get in the car, and leave her husband. And like, I don't know a ton about this one, but one of the taglines was, leaving was one thing, but staying gone is another. And it has themes of resiliency, survival, love, motherhood. And it just seems like something that would be Women's Prize material. And then continuing on just like the topic of women's stories, and I think this is one that is a good blend of like all of that, but also is a little bit, feels slightly like it could be considered more commercial fiction, is the book So Thrilled for You by Holly Bourne. This sounds incredible. I really want to pick this up. It is about a day where there is a baby shower and all of these women are there, and somehow this ends in a house fire. And I believe we know the fire happened and we're working our way backwards to like figure out how this happened, which is one of my favorite tropes. But what I think is super interesting about this is that it says basically like everyone's a suspect. And there are 4 different women that the blurb talks about. So there's one who's child-free by choice. There's one who's desperate to conceive and is jealous of people who have. There is a mother who's finding motherhood to be super hard. And then there is the woman whose baby shower it is, who didn't want the baby shower to begin with. So I think this like strong motherhood theme, but like with the different lenses of motherhood and the desire or not to be a mother, is something that is very interesting and timely. So this is another one I think I might be a little shocked to not see on the list. And I only have 4 more, so we're rounding it out. So the book, so there's always a book on there, or it feels like in recent years, there's always like a book on there that's like Caribbean fiction, dealing with the topic in the Caribbean. And this time I've seen a lot of people talking about the book A House for Miss Pauline by Diana Macaulay. And this, like, when I was hearing people talk about it, I was like, that does sound really interesting. I could see how that could maybe be on the list. But then when I went and read the blurb myself, I feel like there's a part of it that people are leaving out, which I'll get to. But basically, this is a book about a woman who's like 99 years old. One night she hears the stones of her house like calling to her, and she's like, I'm not gonna make it to my 100th birthday. And so we're learning about her life in rural Jamaican village. So she taught herself she taught herself using stolen books, and she did like everything she could to help and raise her family. And then the thing that got me, the hook for me, was it talks about how the house was built from the stones of a plantation that used to be on that property. So like she built it with those stones in defiance of the fact that her ancestors were slaves there. And then it says that she knows more than she's letting on about the death of a man who came to try to take her land as his own and for his family. So it's like a little murder mystery, but also like historical maybe? I don't know. Everything about that sounds like a wild ride, and I would love to see that one on the list. And then we have the Lost Love Songs of Boise Sing. This is another one where it's like different women's stories. So it's the stories of these women who have some connection to Boise Sing. And it's just about like the dark side of love, relationships, human experiences. I've seen a lot of people talk about this one as one that might be on there. I do think that there is a potential that this one could end up being like the Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, where everybody thought it was going to be there and then it wasn't, and we don't know if it was even submitted, because that is the thing. We don't know what books publishers are submitting. So like that's what this one reminded me of for some reason, but I really hope to see it because this sounds like a great story about the experiences of a very different group of women. And then my last two feel a little bit like wild cards, not gonna lie, but both of them are things that interested me, and so I just wanted to spice up the list. I don't think I've heard anyone talk about either of these. So I think that's been one of my favorite parts of these videos, is just hearing about all these books I might not have heard about before. So the first one I actually heard about from the author Claire Fuller. It was one of her top 10 books of 2024, and that's Bird Eye by Judith Hennigan, I think it is. This is a book from an indie press, and it's about a commune in, I think, upstate New York. And it's like a declining commune. So like it used to be pilgrimage worthy, but it is no longer in its heyday. And this stranger shows up at the commune and they let him stay. And then something happens. So there's like a big announcement from two people in the commune. And it sounds like things go kind of to hell in a handbasket. But it says it's about tolerance, the choices we make in good faith, and what they cost us. And that just sounds so good. And I feel like the Women's Prize does always have indie press books on the list. So I would love to see that one get some more attention. And then the last one is Above Us, the Sea is the Sea. I think Above Us, the Sea, Above Us is it? You'll see the cover here, by Anaya Card. And this one, again, wild card, but it's about a woman who, after a night at a gay bar, ends up in like this love triangle with this man and his boyfriend. And then there's like a big tragedy that happens and they like go their separate ways, and it follows the woman and like what happens to her in the aftermath. It's about grief, the drive for connection, and just like finding connections in a hostile environment. So I think this one could be really interesting. And again, I love to see books we've never heard of on the list. That's one of my favorite things, and I know that's going to happen because it always does, and it's always a delight. All right, so those are the 16 books that I put on my wish list / predictions video for the Women's Prize for Fiction. I would love to hear down below, if you've read any of these books. Do you think they might be contenders for the list? What books do you think are going to be on there that either I mentioned or didn't mention? Or just favorite books by women that came out in 2024, any of that. But yeah, so I am looking forward to finding out on March 4th what the books are that are longlisted. Also, if you're not aware, the 6th of March is when the long list is going to be announced for the Carol Shields Prize, which is basically like the US's equivalent of the Women's Prize. This is, I think, its 3rd year. The Carol Shields Prize does include women and non-binary authors in their eligibility, so slightly different from the Women's Prize. But yeah, so that, I'm not going to make a prediction for that one, but there will be a video with my reaction to either each of those separately or like one big video. I haven't decided how I'm going to do that. But yeah, I will be talking about both because this is one of my favorite times of the year because I love both of these prizes. They always bring new and exciting and interesting books into my life. So that is it. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Bye!